All right, welcome to the exclusive patron-only podcast. Thanks for listening to.
How you going?
This is way more chilled. I don't have to stress about Nelson Mandela anymore. That guy is gone.
Yeah. And as opposed to sitting on a business chair, we're now just laying back on Ali's bed. The way it should be.
The most relaxed way.
This is the only way that you can hang out with a Pakistani man. You have to lay down on a mattress.
And have those. Yeah, these pillows suck. We need to have those round oval pillows.
Yeah.
That basically is filled with stone. and have like a
And
shisha.
where are our turbans?
Oh, fuck me. Should have told me. We have towels. We could literally be towel heads if you want.
All right. It's happening. Hold on. Just a second. Just for you guys.
Yeah.
And they're both used towels, by the way. And I don't care. I don't care that I'm wearing Ali's ass on my head.
All right, okay, let's wear these down.
Yeah. Please hold. We'll be getting to the very important business of how close the Koch brothers are to rewriting the US Constitution. But first, I think we all need to take into consideration that no matter how powerful the Koch brothers get, there is still just one God.
Yeah, no
Not
God.
two gods, one God.
That is-
And in continuation with these religious themes, we have come to the conclusion that the Koch brothers are what did the monsters go against?
Oh yeah. Well, the Muslim name for them are Yajuj Majuj.
Yeah, Yajuj and Majuj.
But in the book of Ezekiel, I can't remember their names now.
Who cares? Yajuj and Majuj is their names.
No.
They are two monsters that live in the Great Wall of China, and when they finish eating bodies, they will wreak havoc on the world.
No, that is the bullshit Muslim version of it. Yajuj Majuj.
The Christian version, on the other hand, is much more realistic.
Okay, so my phone just died. But anyways, Yajuj Majuj.
Right, well, that is the best sell I've ever heard of an Oppo phone.
Well, I didn't charge it, so it's gonna die eventually. Anyway, so
Not good enough.
So we realized Koch brothers are the modern day Yajuj. Hanoil, Bol and Handball. What
No.
are they called?
Doesn't sound Christian at all. It was like Gorag and Gorag Jr.
No, not Jew. Gog and Gojek or something like that. Anyways, you can look it up. That's your homework.
Yeah, you do that.
So they're supposed to. The legend is that Alexander the Great basically built a wall and suppressed. You know what it is? I'm pretty sure it's supposed to like represent the Mongols or something. So he just built a wall that keeps these away. And in biblical terms, it's in the end of days, the Jews believe that these two characters will come during the end of days, not the day of judgment. And they'll basically be just like evil's, like Satan's right-hand men that will usher in the dark days. And the Bible I think the Christian belief is that they'll just come during the day of judgment as like a sidekicks to the Antichrist. Anyways,
it is the Koch brothers.
It is the Koch brothers.
What is that? What have they made their fortune from? Warming up the planet to the point that it becomes a hellscape.
Yeah.
That's them. They are bringing around the end of days.
Hell is supposed to be hot.
Think
and
about it.
Think about it. And also, Obama and Osama are the same person. Because if you think about it, it's Obama and Osama. Some idiot.
Which I guess actually means that Osama bin Laden was right. He is the second coming of Jesus. Because the Koch brothers really hate Obama.
Yeah,
and that's when they started to become extremely active in politics. They always were, but that's when they reared their ugly heads to a new level, where they started fashioning the Tea Party, for example, into their own making. A really good example of how they manipulate politics is that the Tea Party was naturally moving purely because they were concerned that Obama didn't have a birth certificate. And to this day, I remain pretty optimistic that no, he was born in Zimbabwe. But,
Kenya.
Well, I think it's Zimbabwe. You can think it's in Kenya. That's your opinion.
It's Africa. It's the same country.
Somewhere.
Yeah.
But it wasn't America.
But it was... But Koch Bros, like the reach of these guys is while researching for the actual pod, which had some level of substance, I came across this lecture from an institute in South Africa, this Libertarian Institute, and I found some of their opinions to be, I don't know, I want to look more into this institute. They just don't look like a regular academic institute. And I looked up, their sole funding comes from the Koch brothers.
Is it called the University of Extreme Freedom?
No, but it ought to. So this whole the idea of this entire part. In fact, okay, before we totally get into the Koch brothers, do you want to give the update on your African gang video, or does that come later?
Oh yeah, the point is I bitched out. Pretty much because Matt refused to do the edit of it.
Yeah.
I read out the script, turned to him and said, "So what do you think?" And then he just looked at me with the tiredest eyes I've ever seen and said, "We cannot make this video."
Yeah, I had a conversation with him. He was very, very afraid.
To say that he was moderately against it is a huge understatement.
No, but like, did these guys play any role in it? Like, a lot of them were like, "Oh, I don't know if you should do it."
No. Matt was against it from day one. You people did nothing but exacerbate the problem, and shame on you for not letting the truth be told.
Yeah. So one guy was so good because it was the point that I made. It's like, if you like Chomsky, you've got to do it. Which is true. Hey, believe in the truth. Well, the point is, Jordan's not doing it anymore.
My two intellectual big figures in my life, Noam Chomsky and Matt, my editor. Who really likes Seinfeld.
And the funniest thing was, at work, I know this guy who's like trying hard to be a comedian, and Jordan just put up like a thing asking for writers. In fact, if any of you have the kink for bashing the Liberal Party and would want to contribute, send us something, and you could be a writer.
Yeah, do it on the disability health insurance scheme. Yeah. Research the disability health insurance scheme. Read about 10,000 words in it. Minimum. And then fashion me a comedic script so I don't have to do my job. Huh?
But so this guy that I met, he was really excited to like apply for the opportunity. He thinks he's gonna get paid a lot.
Does he?
I don't know. He's like, "Oh, if I could do this, maybe I could quit my job." I was like, "Don't quit your job, man. Don't do that." But anyway, so he says that. So I asked him if he's got a script because he's been trying to like do this for some time, and he's like, "In fact, I've got just the right script for Jordan." I was like, "Okay, what's the script about?" And without knowing any of the context of like the last Patreon podcast, goes like, "Okay, so it's on African gangs."
Well, he's high to my books.
Yeah, good on you, mate. Good on you.
I want to get into that Telegraph. Now I look like Captain Phillips.
The funniest thing is, like, my turban does look like an ethnic Pakistani man's turban, and yours looks like a white guy trying to put on a turban.
I look like Marge Simpson after she's gotten out of the shower. Now, let's talk about Koch brothers.
Yeah, Koch brothers.
Because Bill Maher just interviewed this woman called Nancy McLean, who's been researching and following the Koch brothers for the last 30 years. She's been obsessed with how they've been changing politics in America. And I don't know how the Americans are going to do anything about it. The Koch brothers have won.
Yeah, because they're, unlike idiots, they literally play the long game, which is that they're not too everyone knows that they're not too focused on like getting the president in anymore. What they're more focused on is the Senate races, local elections, and I think the
state legislatures.
They love
state politics. Is what we've mentioned before on this podcast. A lot of power is in state politics, and it's really easy to influence. And as I showed in that Brumbies video, you can buy a politician for like 10 grand. The deputy premier, you give him $10,000, he'll destroy the most culturally significant national park in the country.
Despicable. Absolutely disgraceful. Yeah, and you know what the thing is? This is the recent sort of realization that I've gotten. I always thought Koch brothers to be these pragmatic men who basically do all of this to make sure that environmental policy stays away from the legislature so that they can keep pumping carbon dioxide into the environment.
Because $100 billion is not enough.
Because $100 billion is not enough. And
which is what they're worth.
Yeah, which is and I thought that was like the entire point. So which is like keep making more dollars. But I don't think that's the case. Like the fact that they were funding that libertarian South African think tank tells me that they're genuine conservatives, as in, and not wait.
No, they're genuine libertarians.
They're genuine libertarians.
They've surreptitiously taken over the conservative movement in America, but they understand that they have an extremely unpopular ideology, which is basically, you guys get nothing and we get everything. And I really don't understand why that hasn't caught on with the public.
Man, I don't know if it's like that unpopular though. Like that's their economic angle of it, but they're also talking about like social issues. So one of the things that Bill Maher guest was talking about is like the Supreme Court nominee. That they've handpicked a Supreme Court nominee that might come in next, and that seems to me like a cultural war thing.
No, this is the grand plan of it, because I've watched a bunch of lectures that she's put out. And it's so deep. I don't even know where to begin. This pod could go on for 10 hours, and we'd only be scratching the surface. But I think we'll condense it into 40 minutes. In between stories of Ali's and my lives and our embarrassing sexual encounters. Because that takes priority. But the main thing that they're saying there is that they fight these culture wars because they understand that is a way of getting evangelical Christians onto their page. So originally they were just like, I don't care about anything. All I care about is economics and making the Constitution work specifically for me. That was it. So they wanted to change, which is the biggest ambitious thing I've ever heard in my life. At the end of it, when you listen to all of this, you go, they are the most evil men on the planet. Having said that, they're extremely impressive, man. As Ali said afterwards, yeah, I think they're evil, but damn, they're pretty boss.
They're boss as fuck.
Yeah.
Because they're not just interested in, like, pumping out the next Vice video. What they're focused on is, like, how the media landscape can slowly make institutional changes that anything to do with reality stays away from your screen.
And they've done and they've also chipped away. This is their biggest accomplishment in terms of the culture wars. If you look at how much, in fact, in their writings, they constantly talk about how they can't wait until their own generation dies off. They're talking about the golden generation, the one that fought, the one that is the most patriotic generation, the one that fought in World War II.
The boomers.
They want them to die. No. The golden generation is before the boomers. Yeah. They want them to die off because they have this unchangeable belief that a government is important. For some reason. I don't know why they have that. And
because they saw it disappear from within their eyes and they realized, yeah, government is important because I don't want tanks in my backyard.
But they also remember when the government used to work for the people. Yeah. And the Koch brothers have slowly manipulated the government in America to become extremely ineffective. And as a result, baby boomers, much less trust in the government. And then millennials are getting to the point where they're like, do we even need one?
Yeah,
is a government necessary?
What's the point?
What's the point of cops?
It's just oppression.
And yeah, exactly.
You know, I don't know if you guys have seen, I feel like some of you might have seen it. I'm very sure Jordan hasn't seen it. Have you seen that viral 1940s ad that's making the rounds about fascism?
No.
So it's basically like, and this tells you about the golden generation. So it's an ad that was made by the government of United States back in the day, where like a guy is standing and he's screaming things like, "Oh, this country is going to shit. We want to make it go back to what it's supposed to be, and all the problems are black people, the Jews." And like in the next cut is some guy standing in the audience with another French guy, and he's saying, "He's right, isn't he? He's talking some sense." And the other guy's like, "That's bordering fascism." And he's like, No, he's saying the right things. And the next thing you see is like the same guy, "And the Masons, they need to be killed." And the guy that was just saying that he's talking some sense to say, "Hey, wait a minute, I'm a Mason." And then the French guy's like, This is the problem that you have. He is conning you. You believed him until he was not talking about you." And then it was basically just like, avoid fascism.
Wow. Antifa's most powerful video.
Hey, whatever. But
Turns out that it wasn't beating up people that kind of like Gavin McInnes.
But it tells you like what the golden generations had their priority, and it's like it literally gives you no like return to put out that ad. You know, there's no policy thing. It's literally trying to educate the population, and the golden generation still believes in some of those ideals. So I guess when they die, you know what? The baby boomers are the worst generation that has ever lived.
Yeah, easily.
The boomers and it's too early. But the new millennial hipsters also kind of suck.
Why?
They're just too
Gen
entitled.
Z.
Yeah, Gen Z.
I don't know anything about them. I saw them on Talking About Your Generation, and then I thought, you guys are the least funniest out of all of them. You're less funny than Andy Lee, which says a lot.
No, wait, our generation. What's our generation?
Gen Y.
Yeah, we're pretty fucked too.
Yeah, we're shit.
We're shit.
There's no debating that.
Maybe the one after us, which seems to be most
Gen
of our
Z.
pod audience, because by looking at you guys' email, born in 1998, 2000, I was like, holy shit, man. that's like a very soon.
Oh, little tadpoles. So anyway, the point is, tadpoles, listen up, all right? Grow some legs. You're going to get schooled.
Yeah, you got to
In
jump.
this Koch Brothers thing that we've been talking about for the last 16 minutes. We're going to finally delve into it. That's actually, we're doing record time now. The main points that they're saying is that their ideology has shifted from not caring about who's in power. They don't care about that anymore. What they care about is changing the rules, which is so much scarier. So the Koch brothers fund a bunch of constitutional experts and a bunch of law professors and really talented lawyers to work for them in ways that they can change state constitutions as a test. And they actually funded and were heavily involved with the CIA's efforts to overthrow Salvador Allende in Chile and replace them with Pinochet in the 70s. And they did that because they wanted to use it as a testing ground for their ideology of making it a really libertarian constitution. And so they paid for an economist at the time called Buchanan, who was very prominent at the time, to go down and rewrite the constitution for Chile. And obviously it failed miserably. And recently they had an election, I think in 2014, where this president, I can't remember her name, she was elected with 2/3 of the vote. Yeah. So you would imagine that you'd be able to do whatever you wanted if you had that much power. But then she got in there and then she realized that, quote, the new constitution had padlocks and locks on every sentence. So that she couldn't do anything with her power. Even though that she was in there, the constitution stayed as it was. And there was things enshrined in it such as banks are allowed to take your entire pension and gamble with it. And so there's heaps of people in Chile that have lost their entire pensions because corporate power has been enshrined in the constitution. And that is the Koch brothers' end game. And they're doing it with the US at the moment. And they've been funding the Republican Party and slowly radicalizing it away from being conservative to libertarian. This is why everybody who always says that libertarianism never hurt anyone. Chile. And on top of that, George Bush described himself as a libertarian. He invaded Iraq. What are you talking about? He never started any wars.
Bullshit.
Libertarians are the worst. It's exactly what someone said before. It's like if an autistic person came up with a political ideology, that is libertarianism. Yeah,
it's also like a economically it's a fantasy land because. Okay, so in a libertarian system, what happens in 2008? And don't say like, well, 2008 wouldn't have happened if it was a libertarian system. What happens? Nothing. You need to get the state involved. You need a state. And imagine if there was none.
But if the Koch brothers had their way, the state wouldn't have been involved, and the US would have collapsed and been in Chile.
And we would have gone into Great Depression.
Which is what happened in Chile.
Yeah, which is what
It's bound and destined to happen, but that's not the worst part of it. The worst part is that they enshrine things into the Constitution. So basically, all of the 20th century, when they say that they're libertarians, what they say is they want society to be like it was in the 19th century, which is that there's just this extremely wealthy upper class that is protected by law, just feudalism. Basically, libertarianism is feudalism. And so all of the advances of the 20th century in like with healthcare, of them passing Medicaid and them passing the Social Security. The Koch brothers hate Social Security and Medicaid, and in fact, in the Tea Party movement, which they're always associated with, they did a survey. They couldn't find one person in the entire Tea Party movement that wanted to get rid of Social Security and Medicaid. And they know this because as soon as a Republican president or politician tries to attack these things, they're voted out.
Because they're really, really popular demands. In fact, like Chomsky was saying that they did a survey on, they asked like a bunch of people if healthcare should be a universal right and it should be enshrined in the Constitution. Half of the people said that it should, and half of the people thought it already was. So like, it would be very difficult to convince a bunch of people to get rid of social services and Medicare in America.
So basically, what they've discovered is that what they have done, it's so genius in terms of like, okay, so they're on one prong. They've hired all of these legal experts to change constitutions, and they get appointed judges. They're very interested in controlling the legal system of America, which is why that they implant their governors that they want into the states, and then those governors, they say, now you appoint all of these judges, and that's usually just most of their demands is to do with the legalities of it. But how they've taken over the Republican Party, and how everyone always goes that they've just turned insane. It is the Koch brothers making it turn insane, because the Republican Party in the 50s was pretty much where the Democrats are now. In fact, they were more left than what the Democrats are now. This is how they've shifted the campaign, the place, because what they do instead is they don't even say to that person, we'll stop funding you, because the Republican governor realizes that I can't get rid of these programs, they're too popular, I'll get voted out anyway, so I'm not going to take your demand. So they go, that's all right then, we'll just fund the primary guy. So they just fund the most insane zealot candidates they can to sideline these people. And they get the votes through evangelicals, mostly, like the religious.
So they're not actually ideologues. They're still interested in their.
Yeah, because originally they were scoffing at people that were into religion. The Koch brothers were anti-religious in the 60s and 70s. But then they realized that all the votes, no one is libertarian. It's about 3 to 4%.
Their natural alliances are amongst the religious people.
Which is why they've started implementing this culture war thing. Because they're trying to get those people on side.
Again, yeah, evil, but so boss. These guys are insane.
They're so smart.
They're
way smarter. You know how you got your smug Trevor Noahs and your Stephen Colberts and your me's of the world are like, I get that religion's dumb. So much dumber than Koch.
Yeah, he just uses people as like, no, Jesus is a boss, but so is this guy. Can you nominate him to Supreme Court now? It's like, yeah, I believe in Bible.
And that's how they got. For instance, this is the control that they have. Even when Barack Obama was the president, they were able to maneuver the Republican Party to block him from exercising his constitutional right to appoint a Supreme Court judge. Now, the reason you want Supreme Court judges is they're the ones that interpret the laws. So, when Obama says, I want coal plants to be 28% cleaner by 2030, which is a very reasonable response given the circumstances, normal Republicans, and you can see the shift, because in the 90s, the Republicans' policy for handling climate change is what the Democrats' policy is now, which is cap and trade. Yeah. And the Republicans wanted, and the Democrats wanted to implement a carbon tax of sorts. Now the Republicans just flat out deny that climate change is happening. All of them. There's 8 of them that admit that climate change is happening out of 270 in the legislature. It's the most
dangerous organization in the world.
And it's because of the Koch brothers. Because they just lock and control the Republican Party. And anyone that goes against them, they sideline. Which is why they campaigned really heavily against Trump. Which is why everyone's always saying... Like, I was having this argument with my dad the other day when he was going, Donald Trump is the worst president I could ever imagine. And then I really got down to it. And basically what he was saying is, his tweets are mean. But that's how he got in. And he is at least not a Koch brother president. Even though he's still being maneuvered and manipulated by the same people that are paid by Koch. Yeah. And if the Koch brothers had it up to them, they would have elected Ted Cruz or what's the other guy's name? Scott
John
Bear or something.
Kasich?
No, not John Kasich. He was at the Scott Walker.
Yeah, Scott
They
Walker.
wanted those two.
So wait, what you're saying is that Koch brothers don't want change to go in their favor. They want the ability to just restrict change in general for all future generations.
Yes, and they get it because they're making the Republican Party obsolete. So even all these old people that are rusted on Republicans, they're starting to not vote Republican. It's basically the places that they get their votes from are gun nuts, nationalists, and evangelicals. That's the new Republican Party. Before it was just old people.
Which are what, like at least 35% of the electorate, right?
Right. But the thing is, they understand that they're losing an electoral battle, and even though they've co-opted one of the mainstream parties in the country, and they've made it a radical fringe party, which is by every definition, every serious conservative thinker, as Chomsky was pointing out, now says that the Republican Party is not a mainstream parliamentary party anymore. It's pretty much more extreme than One Nation at this point. It's an insane party now. And so they understand that they're making that brand toxic, but they don't care. They're just using that party and destroying the GOP from within and using its power while it's still there to lock in the legal procedures that they want for generations to come, because they know it'll be impossible to reverse if they change the rules. And so what they're doing now, which is the scariest part of it, is there's something called, I can't remember what it's called, like a Congressional Super Congress, something along the lines of that, where they have completely bought, I think it's if you have 34 of the 52 states demanding for a Congressional Super Conference where they can sit there and rewrite the Constitution. They found it in some old archaic document years ago. But basically it's legal that if 34 states come together and say, we want to rewrite the Constitution, they all come together and then they can just write a new Constitution up. And they're up to 28 out of the 34 legislatures that they need, and they have 6 in the hole, and it's just a matter of turning those 6 that are Republican controlled at the moment, but they're just not as insane. But they think that they can control them within the Trump's presidency. That's their new brag. Like one of their major, I can't remember what his name is, but the general that is the one that they have like a chain of command. And one of their generals, who's in charge of state legislature, was bragging to a bunch of donors that the Democrats don't even have a grasp of the master plan. They don't even know what's happening. It's pretty much just this historian that knows.
Yeah, because
That's
technically, this is what you would need to do in order to like change the Second Amendment or something, right? But instead, you would like the best thing that Obama could do was like appear on Ellen.
Yeah.
To talk about and just
Yes,
and like
yes.
maybe like cry a little bit. It could be like genuine cries too. But what I'm saying is like these guys have it figured out way better. Yeah. Like, they've realized, fuck Ellen. Let's just buy these shitty trash Republican people that will appear for elections and then eventually get them all to just write a new constitution for us.
Yeah. And they're really dangerously close to doing that, which is even scarier because America is a superpower and they need to be leading in the fight against climate change. But they're slowly turning all the legal proceedings into their favor. That's their main goal.
Wait, okay. Before we end this, because we have to, how would you compare the Koch brothers to like Gina Reinhardt and her influence on Australian politics?
It's not even comparable.
Like, it's so substandard compared.
Because what does Gina Reinhardt do? Give the Liberal Party a few $1 million?
But, like, don't you think, like, Gina Reinhardt and Rupert Murdoch, like, single-handedly got Tony Abbott to, like, become the Prime Minister?
Yeah, but that's the thing. They're focused on the election. These guys aren't focused. They don't care about elections.
Again, stupid me thinking it's a small game.
It's a small game.
Yeah, fair enough.
And so, the other part that's really interesting about it is, guess who their biggest political inspiration is? Lenin. Lenin is their biggest political inspiration because he was able to get Russia with the Bolsheviks, who were not a popular party at the time. The Mensheviks were far more popular than the Bolsheviks were. But he was able to control power in Russia. And so they've extensively read, this was in the 60s, they're way beyond that now, they're much more sophisticated. But in the 60s, they started reading him and used him as a model for how to implement change when you do not have a popular movement. And so what they've done is...
Damn, that makes so much sense, because Lenin did that. Lenin is like famous for having a goal, and he would not compromise on the goal, but he would compromise anywhere in between with infinite malleability to reach that goal.
Yeah.
And he was famous for achieving that goal.
Yeah.
Always. And yeah, he did the same thing. He managed to get like so many countries fall within the Soviet Union. Like it became huge. And Lenin, as like Jordan was saying, Bolsheviks were like mainly an urban Russian political force. They weren't even within rural Russia. And to think that they took over half of Europe. I mean, admittedly, like there was other factors too, but like Lenin played the long game too.
Yeah, he just sees his opportunity, but he was thinking about it, a really big goal. And these guys are doing the same thing. But also, the other interesting part of that is, one of Lenin's main teachings in that is that you should invest heavily in turning a bunch of very educated people into zealots. So train them from a young age and indoctrinate them in your ideology, and then set them forward in larger bureaucracies, so that the bureaucracy doesn't turn them into what it wants. They turn the bureaucracy into what they want. So what they've been doing since the 60s is training, just selecting people, like scouting them out, like how the NBA finds people that would be good basketballers. They find people like Ben Shapiro, for instance, but say, someone who's training in constitutional law that they see has right leanings, and then they pay for his entire education and further his education and make him extremely educated, but they indoctrinate him heavily and train him through their educational facilities that they've set up, because they also set up a bunch of universities and a bunch of think tanks, and they put them through all of these, so they become extremely indoctrinated, which is why this Supreme Court appointee is one of those guys. They paid for his education from a very early age. So they know what he is now. Yeah,
and now he's reaping. It's like you sow the seed, and now they're getting the fruit.
That's what they did.
Lenin does the same thing. The reason why the Soviets, the Bolsheviks managed to capture all of Russia was because they had enough members within the Tsarist army that were sympathetic to the communist cause, and that had always were like part of the communist movement from before. And because they had like funded them, kept them there, encouraged them to join the state apparatus, so eventually it could corrode from within.
It's incredible.
I'm jumping ships. I'm with the Koch brothers now. That's
They're just too smart.
Yeah.
Give it to them.
Yeah.
The Constitution is yours.
All right.
You can't say they haven't earned it.
You get the last word, but we've got to